Thanks, Brooke. Did the White House just draw a new red line in the sand when it comes to military action in Syria? The lead starts right now. What is the next move against Bashar al-Assad and Syria? Different emphases in the Trump administration on regime change, and then this afternoon the White House seemed to draw a new line when it comes to the use of barrel bombs. Sending a message, U.S. warships take a turn for North Korea. Will it rattle Kim Jong-un and his nuclear dreams, or have the opposite effect? Plus,
busted his lip.
Oh my God! Look at what you did to him!
shocking video of authorities roughing up and possibly injuring a United Airlines passenger who didn't want to give up the seat he paid for to a United employee. How on earth is the airline explaining this?
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We're going to begin with some breaking news in the national lead today. A terrifying day for students and staff at a California elementary school. Police in San Bernardino, California, say someone fired shots in a classroom at North Park Elementary School. 2 people are dead and 2 students are in critical condition. CNN's Stephanie Elam is just arriving in San Bernardino for CNN, and she joins me now live. Stephanie, what happened?
Right. What we are learning happened this morning here, Jake, is that there was an adult male who entered a classroom to visit this classroom, and that he then shot a female adult who was in that classroom before turning the gun on himself and killing himself. We also know that 2 children in the classroom were also injured. They're in critical condition. And what we understand is one was taken by ambulance, one was airlifted. And they do not believe that those children were targeted or that they were related to either this man or this woman. But just happened to be in close proximity of that woman, and that is why that they were injured. We also know that at this point they have not found a note. There was nothing on this male adult to explain why this would have happened. And also we know that the school is going to be closed for the next couple of days while they do research this. Let me just show you what's behind me here right now, just give you a perspective of what's happening. They're having the adults, the parents, the guardians come here to this high school, which is right down the street, Cajon High School. They're processing them, making sure that they are the guardian, the parent who's allowed to come and get their child. The children are going to the Cal State University that's nearby, Cal State University Santa Barbara. They are having the children there, and then they're slowly bringing the parents there to reunite them, as they also need to process some of these children and talk to them and see what they may have seen. Same thing with some of the people who may work at this elementary school. Still developing here, but what it looks like is that it may be a potential murder-suicide that happened here inside this elementary school, Jake.
All right, Stephanie Elam, thank you, and CNN will keep you updated on the story as it develops. But let's turn to the world lead now. The White House today saying further action definitely will be considered by the United States against Syria. The Trump administration has not been known to speak with clarity on its Syria policy, and today Sean Spicer made comments which seem to suggest a new red line for the administration, and that's only adding to the fog of war after last week's missile strikes. Here's what UN Ambassador Nikki Haley told me yesterday on CNN's State of the Union.
Regime change is something that we think is going to happen because all of the parties are going to see that Assad's not the leader that needs to be taking place for Syria.
But there seems to be a different message coming from others in the administration, including from America's top diplomat, the Secretary of State. Let's go live now to the Pentagon and CNN's Barbara Starr. Barbara, does the U.S. want regime change in Syria, and will it force regime change in Syria?
Well, Jake, the one thing that is clear is the Trump administration wants Assad out now. They seem to all be in agreement on that point, that he has to go. But how you get that regime change suddenly may be sounding an awful lot like the Obama administration. As Syrian jets resumed combat operations at the airbase the U.S. struck, the Pentagon says the missile strike resulted in damage or destruction to 20% of Syria's operational aircraft, plus damage and destruction to fuel, ammunition, and air defense capabilities at the site. And confusion about what happens next.
Morning.
With the UN ambassador saying one thing about the future of Syria's dictator, telling CNN's State of the Union,
there's not any sort of option where a political solution is going to happen with Assad at the head of the regime.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson seeming to say another. As he heads to Russia, Tillerson emphasizing the Trump White House puts a top priority on fighting ISIS.
We believe the Syrian people will ultimately be able to decide the fate of Bashar al-Assad.
White House spokesman Sean Spicer acknowledging both goals.
We all recognize that happens, and there can be
a multi-pronged approach where you're ensuring that ISIS is contained and there's a de-escalation of the proliferation of chemical weapons, at the same time creating the environment for a change in leadership.
Tillerson, attending the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Italy, says the world cannot stand by and watch. State Department officials tell CNN Tillerson's message in Moscow: Russia bears responsibility for Assad's actions. And there may be more leverage as a dossier of responsibility for the nerve agent attack takes shape. According to U.S. officials, Assad either knew about this specific attack or had given commanders standing authority to use nerve agent. More chemical sites in western Syria likely exist, and scientists are still alive who know how to make nerve agent. The U.S. also looking for direct evidence Russian commanders on the ground knew about the planned attack. So, is there a new red line for the Trump administration? At the White House briefing just a short time ago, Sean Spicer, the press secretary, seemed to suggest that. He talked about barrel bombs and that if there were gas-filled barrel bombs, that the Trump administration would seek to go after those, but not entirely ruling out going after all barrel bombs. So let's explain for a minute. A barrel bomb is a very deadly weapon used by the Assad regime. They throw these things, they're filled with chlorine or shrapnel or nails or other explosives out of helicopters. They cause massive death on the ground, not even from the chlorine, that's happened a few times, but from this other explosive power. If you want to draw a red line and start going after those helicopter-borne weapons, that would in fact be a massive military enterprise for the U.S. Jake?
That's right. Sean Spicer is saying that it would prompt a response. He didn't necessarily say what kind of response, but it is an interesting remark. Barbara Starr live at the Pentagon for us. Thank you so much. The White House says it is not ruling out more military action in Syria, especially if there are more chemical weapons attacks or barrel bombs. Will Congress go along with the administration's possible new red line? The top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee will join me next. Stay with us. Welcome back to the lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Let's stick with our world lead now. The White House seemed to draw a new line for Bashar al-Assad today. Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, declared, quote, if you gas a baby, if you use barrel bombs, you will see a response from this president. The White House also saying today it cannot envision a stable future in Syria with Assad remaining in power. Now, this all comes as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson prepares to meet his Russian counterpart this week amid a growing divide between the two world powers. Joining me now to discuss this all is Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island. He's an Army veteran and the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. Senator Reed, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.
So the president ordered the strike, according to the White House, because it was in the, quote, vital security interests of the United States. Do you agree?
I think it was important to respond to the despicable behavior of the Syrian regime, Assad regime, but it hasn't changed the facts on the ground, which is Assad controls significant territory, there's Russian support, but in terms of stopping, if you can, the chemical weapons attacks against the people of Syria, I hope it succeeds.
The White House said today that it would hold open the possibility of further military action against the Assad regime. And they said there's no change in their posture. But Sean Spicer, your fellow Rhode Islander, also said that gassing a baby or using a barrel bomb would prompt a response from the president. How did you interpret that comment?
Well, there's been several directions that the administration has taken over the last several weeks. One is seeming to concur that Assad should stay in power, or there are no attempts to remove him. Then the latest rhetoric is that he cannot stay there for a long period of time. The initial response with respect to the attack was, I think, appropriate. This was to prevent any further chemical attacks. I think they're still searching, frankly, for a policy and for a strategy. And one of the factors on the ground is the significant presence of the Russians, so they have to consider that.
In September 2013, as you know, President Obama declined to strike Syria after President Assad crossed the red line that President Obama had drawn, Assad using chemical weapons on his own people outside Damascus, killing about 1,400. Now, you have said that failure to act had, quote, adverse consequences. Do you wish that President Obama had done in 2013 what President Trump did last Thursday?
Well, I think the major issue is by declaring a red line, you have to follow it. I think what the president saw was, first of all, any lack of strong support in the Congress. There was an attempt to provide some authority that failed with bipartisan opposition. And then he also saw the opportunity to remove the chemical weapons. He chose the latter. But the real issue is, and this is where the Trump administration has to be careful too, is if you draw a red line, very clearly you have to be prepared to follow up just to maintain the credibility and credence of the president.
Let's talk about the chemical weapon removal, because President Obama and his administration heralded that a great degree. I want you to hear what President Obama's former National Security Advisor, Dr. Susan Rice, said in January, quote, "We were able to find a solution that didn't necessitate the use of force, that actually removed the chemical weapons that were known from Syria in a way that the use of force would never have accomplished. We were able to get the Syrian government to voluntarily and verifiably give us its chemical weapons stockpile." Dr. Rice got 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post fact checker on that comment today. Do you think the Obama administration misled the public about how many of the chemical weapons had been removed from Syria?
I think there was still always a lingering suspicion at first that there was some chemical weapons, a small amount perhaps, that were retained. And the other reality, too, as you point out, there are scientists there that can fabricate these weapons given time and the precursor chemicals. I think they achieved for several years a situation where chemical weapons weren't used, but the reality is they can be replaced, and they apparently were replaced or retained.
All right, Senator Jack Reed, Democrat of Rhode Island, thank you so much. We appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, coming up next, we will talk with an individual who flew the unfriendly skies. Welcome back to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Let's turn to the politics lead now, the start of what could be the most critical week for Commander-in-Chief Trump on the world stage so far. The president is facing a full plate of geopolitical crises and military maneuvers, as we mentioned earlier. The world is waiting to see if his Tomahawk missile strike on a Syrian airbase will lead to a more clear policy and strategy, and what the threshold might be for further U.S. military engagement in Syria. CNN's Sarah Murray is live for us on the North Lawn of the White House. And Sarah, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said today, quote, "If you gas a baby, if you use a barrel bomb, you'll see a reaction from this president." Did they mean to set a new red line on the use of barrel bombs?
Well, Jake, Sean Spicer pointed this out twice during the briefing, certainly giving the indication that the president may not just draw the line at chemical weapons. This administration may respond even to acts of conventional warfare. Now, this comes on a day when the president got perhaps the biggest win of his domestic agenda.
I, Neil M. Gorsuch, do solemnly swear.
Donald Trump celebrating his first major legislative win today with a Rose Garden event formally placing Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court.
The most important thing that a president of the United States does is appoint people, hopefully great people like this appointment, to the United States Supreme Court. And I can say this is a great honor. And I got it done in the first 100 days. That's even nice. You think that's easy?
Trump basking in a high point for his young presidency and touting what may end up being the most significant accomplishment of his first 100 days in office. The president also enjoying accolades on the foreign policy front.
I ordered a targeted military strike.
A new CBS News poll shows 57% of Americans approve of his decision to launch strikes against Syrian military targets, following a grisly chemical weapons attack against civilians by Syrian government forces. But the most vexing question, what comes next? Today, Trump's White House press secretary suggested that chemical weapons attacks are not the only kind that may spark a response.
If you gas a baby, if you put a barrel bomb in to innocent people, I think you will see a response from this president. That is unacceptable.
Even as he insisted the president's core mission has not wavered.
The Trump doctrine is something that he articulated throughout the campaign, which is that America's first. We're going to make sure that our national interests are protected.
The public is skittish about further action. 7 in 10 say the president should get congressional approval before authorizing any more strikes. Democrats are echoing that sentiment.
President Trump needs to come to Congress and work with us to get an authorization for the use of military force. We need to hear a strategy.
Meanwhile, the White House is trying to tamp down reports of staff turmoil inside the West Wing, particularly the tensions between Chief Strategist Steve Bannon and the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner.
He understands that we have some pretty smart, talented individuals who are opinionated on a lot of subjects. But that our battles and our policy differences need to be behind closed doors.
Now, sources are telling me, at least for now, there seems to be some kind of truce between Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner. Unclear exactly how long that will last, but today White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said Trump is very confident in the team he has around him. Jake.
Sarah Murray at the White House for us. Thank you so much. Sending strong signals to North Korea, a U.S. Back with more in our world lead. Just days after North Korea tested yet another ballistic missile, the U.S. military is trying to send a clear message to the Kim Jong-un regime by deploying the nuclear-powered USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier, along with guided missile destroyers, to the Korean peninsula. This as North Korea is vowing to bolster its defenses, claiming that the U.S. military strike against Syria proves that its nuclear program is justified as a defense against the United States. Let's bring in CNN correspondent Will Ripley, the only U.S. journalist on the ground inside North Korea. And Will, you were with North Korean officials when they found out the USS Carl Vinson was sailing towards them.
It's remarkable, Jake. They are watching the movements of the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group very closely. You'll remember it was here in the region several weeks ago for joint military exercises with South Korea and the U.S., and another round of exercises kicking off today. And so they were not surprised by this. They also watched very closely the missile strike in Syria. They say both of these are provocative acts on the part of the United States that only encourage them to further accelerate their development of nuclear weapons and the missiles that could potentially carry them to the U.S.
And well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said over the weekend that China also agrees that North Korea poses a nuclear threat. Has China, however, signaled any change in its approach to Pyongyang?
There was no mention in his statement after the meeting with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago from Chinese President Xi Jinping, no mention of specifics about North Korea, but we have learned, Reuters is flashing, that in fact Chinese traders have been ordered to return shipments of North Korean coal. Also reports that South Korea and China's nuclear envoys have agreed to take very strong measures in the event of a potential sixth nuclear test, which U.S. and South Korean officials believe really could happen at any time. It's interesting, Jake, people in this country are so isolated from news around the rest of the world, but the movements of the USS Cole Carrier Strike Group and the airstrike in Syria are being covered very extensively by the state-controlled media here because it fits right into the government's narrative that they've been telling people for years that this country is under the imminent threat of invasion by the U.S. And you can probably hear behind me, it's now 5 a.m. here in Pyongyang. This is the alarm that sounds citywide to get people up and going for the day. The nighttime alarm happens at midnight, and they're up at 5 a.m. to begin working for this regime.
And Will, later this week, North Korea is set to celebrate its biggest holiday, and as you have told us many, many times, the country has a tradition of celebrating these holidays with missile launches. Are there any signs that there might be another one?
Well, there was activity at North Korea's Sohae missile launch site that was detected several weeks ago. Unclear if that's going to amount to anything. There has been some satellite imagery showing military machinery being assembled, which could be for a military parade later this weekend. But also, again, there's activity at that nuclear test site, North Korea's nuclear test site, that indicates really at any moment North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could order a nuclear test. And it was around this holiday that's coming up on Saturday, the Day of the Sun, 5 years ago, that North Korea attempted to launch a satellite into orbit. There's also a major political gathering kicking off here today. And don't forget, Vice President Pence is coming to the region in a matter of days as well. So these are all potential opportunities where Kim Jong-un could decide to push the button on a nuclear test that would be a very provocative and defiant message for the United States. Jake.
All right. Will Ripley in North Korea for us. Thank you. That's quite an alarm clock. More in our world lead. In a matter of days, the president did a 180 on his Syria policy, and now differing messages from top administration officials on where to go from here. Joining me now to discuss this and more is former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff. He now heads the Chertoff Group, which is a consulting business with an emphasis on security issues. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good to be on, Jay.
Do you hear a coherent, understandable message from the administration on what the United States government's posture is towards Syria?
Yeah, I actually do. I mean, I think that, first of all, the strike was a meaningful and appropriate response to the use of chemical weapons, which, by the way, demonstrated that the agreement that was supposedly reached in 2013 was not a real agreement. So I think that was important. I think what you now see is a recognition that in the long run, you can't have a sustainable settlement with Assad staying in power. For one thing, the bad blood that's been generated by his atrocities will mean the Sunnis will never accept his control over the entire country. So the Russians also have to realize at some point, if there's going to be a stable resolution to this, he's going to have to be eased out.
So the president obviously had a completely different position on this in September 2013 after the first and the worst chemical weapons attack, 1,400 Syrians killed outside Damascus. He now has a different position. He said that the images after last Tuesday's chemical weapons attack changed his mind on this. Do you think it is important, though, for the president to explain why he had this change of mind? Because we saw the same, those of us who follow the news saw the same types of images back in September 2013. Innocent people, many of them children, some of them babies, dying because of this horrific attack that was said to have been perpetrated by Assad.
Well, I think what you see is the natural occurrence when someone becomes president and it becomes your responsibility and it's on your watch. And I remember back with President Bush, you know, during the campaign, he had talked about he doesn't want to do nation building. Then we had September 11th. All of a sudden, you're confronted with Afghanistan, and now you have to suddenly adjust your position based on new circumstances and maybe more than that, new responsibilities. So I think he explained in his brief statement what his reaction was. I think in this case, it was not rash. It appears that there were several days of discussion about options. And I think President Trump picked a calibrated option that sent a firm message without overreacting.
And one of the messages is this tremendous sympathy that he feels for the innocent victims in Syria. Of course, a lot of people say, well, where is that compassion for Syrian refugees? I asked the UN ambassador from the United States, Nikki Haley, about that yesterday on State of the Union. Take a listen.
They said they couldn't vet properly. They said they didn't have enough information. And I think you've got a president here who's not going to risk American lives for and have that threat when it can't properly be vetted.
But certainly you don't think Syrian children pose a risk to the American people.
Well, Syrian children have to come with Syrian adults, and you don't know. It's hard to know based on the vetting process.
What do you think? You've been an advocate for the Syrian refugee program and other refugees program. What do you make of that?
I think generally the vetting process actually for refugees is better than it is for a lot of people who come to the U.S. It's a very long process, and it takes at least 18 months to 2 years. But look, the administration's entitled to kick the tires and satisfy itself that it doesn't want to make adjustments. I hope they go about that quickly and that we then are able to resume bringing in deserving people who are fleeing from a very bad situation.
When you were in the Bush administration, you served as a member of the National Security Council. What do you make of all the unrest on the National Security Council? First, the National Security Advisor hired, then fired. Then you have Stephen Bannon on the National Security Council, kicked off the National Security Council. What do you make of it? I don't know if you're still in touch with people from the council.
You know, I think this was a somewhat slow transition, and therefore, unlike maybe in past transitions where there was almost a group in waiting, ready to slot in this case, they added people. The issue with General Flynn came up. He left. So I think you're seeing a little bit of a kind of stepping up into a situation that was not fully baked. But I do think you're getting to the point now. You have some very experienced people there. You have General McMaster. You have the Homeland Security Advisor, Tom Bossert. You have Dina Powell, who I worked with, as well as with Tom. So I think you've got some solid, experienced people there. And it sounds to me like things are beginning to settle down.
Lastly, let's turn to the Russia investigation. The chairman has recused himself, Devin Nunes from California. And there is a call from the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, who works for CNN, for Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat, to recuse himself. He writes, quote, both Nunes and Schiff are equally to blame for the committee's loss of focus. How can a committee which handles sensitive classified information conduct its business when the purportedly secret information is discussed even by insinuation publicly in front of the media? What do you think?
I think there's a lot of talking to the media on a kind of play-by-play basis, which is not helpful. I look at the two congressional investigations. The Senate investigation is proceeding in a bipartisan way. It's deliberate. There's not a lot of talking out of school. I think the House has got itself to a position now where, in a sense, everybody's been running in front of the cameras. Honestly, you could easily say, let's save the money on the House investigation, let the Senate do its work, let it be comprehensive, answer the questions, and then when it's all over, we'll see what is actually found.
Secretary Chertoff, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Passover.
Happy Passover to you, too.
Thank you so much. An overbooked flight with not enough people volunteering to give up their seat for hundreds of dollars were offered. What did United Airlines do? They picked one man and they dragged him off. A passenger who saw the whole thing and taped it for us joins us next. Thank you so much. Good to see you. We're back with our money lead now. Fly the friendly skies, United Airlines promises. And when you parse that statement, you realize they're saying that the skies are friendly. They aren't necessarily saying that they are. And we saw evidence of that today after United Airlines sought volunteers from an overbooked Chicago to Louisville flight Sunday to make room for 4 United employees. The problem is the airline did not get enough volunteers, so the airline called in police to forcibly remove this man. A fellow passenger captured this video showing the passenger literally being dragged down the aisle and off the plane. CNN's Renee Marsh is with me here. Renee, what on earth does United have to say?
Well, they have a lot of explaining to do, but for starters, they're saying sorry, as they should. I mean, the video is pretty unbelievable considering this happened because the airline overbooked the flight. And just a short time ago, Chicago's airport police says that the officer seen in that video dragging that passenger, well, he has been placed on administrative leave.
A United Airlines passenger was dragged off of an overbooked flight from Chicago to Louisville when he refused to give up his seat Sunday night.
Busted his lip.
Passengers were horrified as they saw 3 Chicago airport police officers board the plane and yank the man from his seat. His head hit the armrest and blood flowed from his mouth as he was pulled down the aisle.
Oh my God, look at what you did to him!
Witnesses say the flight crew was trying to free up seats for United Airlines employees.
Once they drag the guy off, and then subsequently the United employees come on the plane, the other passengers were just berating the employees, saying things like, you should be ashamed of yourself, you should be embarrassed to work for this company.
In a statement, United said the flight, quote, was overbooked. Normally, when this occurs, passengers are asked to voluntarily give up their seats for compensation, and the situation is resolved. However, this was not the case on Sunday night's flight, and United was forced into an involuntary deboarding situation. Perhaps the compensation was not good enough. The airline didn't get all the volunteers it needed, so its computers picked which passenger to kick off. Families and unaccompanied minors were given priority to keep their seats. Passenger rights advocate Charlie Leoka faults the airline for not offering more compensation.
The maximum of denied boarding, which the government requires you to pay, is $1,350 in cash. And so they could have offered the maximum, and that would have taken care of the problem.
The incident sparked outrage on social media. One person tweeting, United Airlines is pleased to announce new seating on all domestic flights. In addition to United First and Economy Plus, we introduce Fight Club. The backlash so fierce, the airline CEO was forced to respond, tweeting, I apologize for having to re-accommodate these customers. Our team is moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities and conduct our own detailed review of what happened.
Was the passenger wrong in any way for refusing to get off?
I don't think he was wrong. I think my only way of saying that he's wrong is, well, I've never seen this happen before. I've never, ever seen a passenger roughed up and dragged off a plane to put a flight attendant on. I mean, that's just idiocy.
Well, in their statement, Chicago's airport police say that they're reviewing the incident, and they admit the officer seen dragging the passenger off the plane, quote, was not in accordance with standard operating procedure. We should point out, it's unclear how much the airline offered these passengers as compensation. Some passengers say $400, another said $800. That's unclear.
I learned some new terms today. There's re-accommodate reaccommodate, that's what the President of the United said, an involuntary deboarding situation. An involuntary deboarding situation. That's what they call dragging somebody off against their will off an airplane.
That's what
Interesting.
they call it, Jake.
Thank you. That's good corporate speak. I like it. Renee Marsh, thanks so much. And joining me now is Jace Anspaugh. He was sitting a few seats away from the altercation. He took video of the incident. Jay, set the scene for us. You've already boarded the plane. What then?
Well, they first had some maintenance stuff to take care of, and then as soon as after that was done, they...
Sounds like Jace, looks like Jace's signal has gone down. We'll come back to him when we come. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk to Jace Anspaugh. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're having some satellite problems. United Airlines referred to an involuntary deboarding situation with that horrific video of a passenger being dragged off. We had one of those with our satellite issues as well. Let's go back to Jace Anspaugh. He was sitting a few seats away from the man being dragged out of his seat and off the plane. He took video of the incident. So set the scene for us. You boarded the plane. They did some, they had to adjust something, fix it, and then what happened?
Yeah, one of the attendants came up to the front of the plane, let us know that 4 personnel needed to be in Louisville that night because they had work the next day, and so they needed to make room. Asked for 4 volunteers, and there was no volunteers, so they basically said if we're not leaving until there's 4 seats opened up for these personnel. And it took about 10-15 minutes until they decided to go ahead and make the decision for us. And so one of the attendants left. She came back with 4 slips with the seat number and name, and started going to those seats and just basically tell them, we chose you. You got to get off the plane. And yeah, so they approached this doctor, told him to get off the plane, and he refused because he had work the next day. He's a medical doctor here in Louisville.
And so you could hear some of the conversation, and he was saying he couldn't do it because he's a doctor. He had patients to see the next day.
Yeah, exactly. He was very emphatic. I can't be late. I'm a doctor. I got to be there tomorrow. In fact, actually, he volunteered. Him and his wife, they volunteered initially for a second, but once they found out that the next flight wasn't until today at 2:30 p.m., he said, I can't do that. I got to be at work. So he sat back down. So maybe that had something to do with them choosing him, but yeah.
And then he came back on the plane, and he looks like he was bleeding.
Yeah. So after they dragged him off, I mean, he was bleeding he hit his face when they initially dragged him off, as you guys saw, and it was 10 minutes later. He just comes running back in, and runs to the back. His face is bloody, and just clings onto the post in the back and just saying, I gotta go home, I need to go home, I need to go home. And it wasn't until like 30-45 seconds later till authorities followed him. So I don't know what happened in the jetway, but he managed to escape from them and runs back into the plane.
But ultimately he was taken off the plane and did not get to fly to Kentucky.
No, he didn't. He was taken off twice.
And lastly,
once dragged and once put on a stretcher. So.
Lastly, Jace, will this affect whether or not you fly United Airlines again?
Probably, yeah. I mean, the way they handled the situation it wasn't right, and so that will affect it, yeah.
Jace Anspaugh, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Now to the first federal election since President Trump took office. This week begins 2 months of special elections where Democrats hope to flip 4 Republican House seats and hold on to a 5th. First in Kansas, where Republican Congressman Mike Pompeo stepped down to become CIA director. Then in Georgia, the seat of former Republican Congressman Tom Price, now Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. In Montana, former Congressman Ryan Zinke's new title is Interior Secretary. Democrats feel almost certain they'll keep California's 34th congressional district, where Democratic Congressman Javier Becerra resigned to become the state's attorney general. And then there's South Carolina. Republican Mick Mulvaney is now President Trump's budget director. Aside from California, which leans way left, Democrats may have the best chance to flip Georgia. And as CNN's Jason Carroll reports, Democrats are trying to ride a wave of what they hope is momentum all the way to Capitol Hill.
For decades, Georgia's 6th congressional district has been reliably Republican.
We have a real opportunity to flip our district.
But there are signs times might be changing.
I'm proud of the momentum that we've been able to build.
Hi.
Hey, John.
Hey, Jen. Meet Democrat Jon Ossoff. At 30 years old, the former congressional aide and documentary filmmaker
Pleasure to meet you.
has never held public office, but he has become the candidate to beat.
This thing has taken on a little bit of a life of its own, and people are watching across the country because it is the first competitive contest of this new era.
Hey, y'all. Traditionally, voters here in the 6th District, which includes part of Atlanta and the city's affluent northern suburbs, have sent to Congress the likes of Newt Gingrich and most recently Tom Price, who is now Health and Human Services Secretary. It was thought that one of the 11 Republicans running in the special election would claim the seat, until Ossoff turned the race into a referendum on President Trump.
I want to go to Washington and hold people accountable, and that includes the President of the United States.
Trump carried the district by a little more than a point last November. In 2012, Mitt Romney swept it by more than 20 points.
I think spring has sprung.
Ossoff, hoping to tap into angst among Democrats over Trump, has been running ads critical of the president.
But we can't let Donald Trump put us at risk.
How effective do you think that has been for you so far?
There are clearly people who have serious concerns about the president's approach to governance.
Nice to see you. GOP candidate Bob Gray isn't afraid to embrace the president, hiring several of Trump's former state operatives to help his campaign.
It's pretty clear that this is a district that's getting behind our president.
While former Georgia Secretary of State Karen Handel and former State Senator Dan Moody question if the district is truly on the verge of turning blue.
They're dreaming about this, but the Republicans are going to hold on to this seat.
The Republicans will ultimately select a candidate that can beat the Democrat.
Claire Wise has not decided on a candidate, but
it will be a Republican candidate. I think Jon Ossoff is too liberal.
We are so excited you're here.
Cheryl Sykes, also a registered Republican, disagrees. She's backing Ossoff.
I think he is dedicated, and I really feel like we need more balance and more middle-of-the-road people in Washington.
And Dave Ferguson, a self-described independent, summed up his reasoning for supporting Ossoff.
Trump.
Ossoff has raised more than $8 million and has $2 million in the bank. His momentum not lost on Republicans who've added staff and ratcheted up their attacks.
Ossoff wasn't exactly fighting against terrorism. He was fighting against restrictions on cake parties.
One GOP super PAC spending more than $2 million on ads targeting Ossoff, including one that shows video of him in college.
I'm Han Solo, Captain of the Millennium Falcon.
I can't say I mind the comparison to Han Solo too much.
Come on, ready?
Ossoff's goal for the April 18th primary is to get more than 50% of the vote to avoid a June runoff. Do you feel any sort of sense of extra pressure?
Yeah, I do feel it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm human too. And there's a lot of eyes on the race. There's a lot of people I want to make proud.
Jason Carroll, CNN, Roswell, Georgia.
And our thanks to Jason Carroll. We also have a story developing in politics right now. It's not every day a Republican state legislature is trying to impeach a Republican governor, but a sex and corruption scandal has set the stage this week for just that. Alabama Governor Robert Bentley stands accused of using state resources to try to hide an affair with a former top staffer. CNN just learned that the governor has called an emergency staff and cabinet meeting for this afternoon after hearings to consider his impeachment started earlier today. A special prosecutor for the State House Judiciary Committee laid out his claims after releasing an explosive 130-page report last week. Governor Bentley's troubles largely started in 2014 after his ex-wife recorded an explicit phone call between her husband, the governor, and the staffer.
You know what? When I stand behind you, and I put my arms around you, and I put my hands on your breast, and I put my hands on your ears, and pull you in real close. I love that too.
Good Lord. The special prosecutor claims Bentley tried to hide that recording and ordered law enforcement to find who had copies. Last week, the Alabama Ethics Commission recommended he be charged with 2 felony counts. It found probable cause that the governor had violated campaign finance and ethics laws. Bentley denies breaking any laws. He was married to his now ex-wife for 50 years. He'll get another chance to defend himself tomorrow when he's scheduled to testify at the impeachment hearing, if he lasts that long. That's it for the lead. I'm Jake Tapper, turning over to Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Thanks for watching.